Hey everybody, welcome into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for the practice report. Is brought to you by Buyers Auto. That's Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham, and I'm Austin Ward. The Buckeyes are about at the halfway point, at least of practices. If you just get rid of the spring game, then this is number 7 of 14. That 15th in the middle of April. Well, everyone will be looking forward to that. But the offensive line and the tight ends and returning tight end Cade Stover and returning tackle Paris Johnson, some natural positions. They were among the highlights as the Buckeyes updated the progress here at the midway point. We're talking about that line play and the physicality of tight end. Berm, what stood out to you most?
Comfort. The word of today is comfort. Paris Johnson talking about the offensive line, how they're more comfortable now in their positions that they're in as opposed to last year with a lot of guys moving around. Joe Royer talking about getting comfortable being a player at Ohio State. Jacob James talking about how it took him 2 years to get really comfortable here. Cade Stover just being comfortable being wherever he is. That's really the word to me that stood out today, was that everyone just seems like they're right where they're supposed to be, kind of. And, you know, for a guy like Stover, he could be anywhere he wants. That is just his athleticism. But the rest of the guys, especially on the offensive line, you spend your whole life playing left tackle. I don't care how athletic you are, how good you are at playing another position. And Paris did a fine job at guard, but he's a natural left tackle, and just see that comfort.
I was trying to get him to make that point. Like, you know, he's not learning a new position. He has spent his entire life playing tackle, except for 1 year. And he said, you know, that playoff game against Clemson, where he had to fill in and play guard, was the 4th time in his entire life that he had put his hand in the ground as a football player. So that was a much bigger change for Paris Johnson last year than at any other point, and certainly more than he's had to deal with through 7 practices going back to left tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at the way that he played guard last year, you probably think he learned a lot about playing tackle from playing guard. He's more comfortable at tackle, obviously, but now he knows the responsibilities of a guard. He knows exactly where he's supposed to be and what his guard right beside him, who's probably going to be Donovan Jackson, is supposed to do on a play that maybe he remembers from last year. And so everything about his move to tackle is going to benefit this Ohio State offensive line that really, in the 7th practice of spring, is basically settled on the starting 5. Obviously, they've got to build depth, but when you look at last year and the way that there was so much turnover and who's going to play where on this offensive line, and you don't have your starting center for week 1, and it's a completely different person. Tackle's playing guard, guard's playing tackle. Now it's such a strange turn of events from last spring to this spring to have 5 guys that these are our 5, and we're not afraid to tell you that they're probably going to be starting. And so you can just start building that comfort that Berm talked about and that continuity already.
Yeah, it's just really funny. Last time we talked extensively, Cade Stover I was standing with him and Steel Chambers after the Rose Bowl, Nick against the stands over there. He was so fired up about playing linebacker, he was busting. And then, you know, last time you saw Donovan Jackson playing a game, he had number 41 on Keith Byers' number. He doesn't even know who Keith Byers is. But, you know, just throwing one pass, he'd have been happy last year. All these guys, and like you said, Paris Johnson Jr., you know, playing guard, and all of a sudden he's at tackle. So I asked all 3 of those guys, well, in their heart, what's really beating there, you know? And they would never commit that, like Donovan Jackson, I feel natural at guard. I mean, he's got the speed to pull, and like he said, he does like hitting these little guys in open space. And so you know that deep in his heart, he likes to play that position, but he wouldn't commit totally. He wants to play whatever helps the team. You know, I'm not getting into this team rah-rah thing, but Paris Johnson kind of said the same thing. And you heard Cade Stover. I mean, well, Paris, I think Cade wants to have the ball in his hands running over somebody, but you know,
he wants to run someone over. If the ball in his hands, it's consequences.
But I think Paris Johnson is a left tackle. I think Donovan Jackson is going to be an elite guard, and Cade is exactly what they need at tight end right now. So
I think Paris has been more open and dropping more hints that he wasn't truly comfortable at guard and wouldn't have signed up to do that again.
But you're still
Ohio
giving
State.
the kind of the team answer. Yeah, is what I'm saying.
But he hasn't in the past, and it's pretty clear that Ohio State. I mean, he is a tackle, and he needed to be a tackle. And if they had told him that he was going to play guard again this year, I don't think he would be at Ohio State. I mean, that's the bottom line.
But he didn't say that.
Well, he has.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's millions and millions of dollars at stake for him.
Oh, heck yeah.
So I think that's more clear. Donovan Jackson is in a position that's more similar where Paris was a year ago, where he needs to be on the field, and Ohio State has been working with him at that left guard spot with the potential that he could become a tackle if that need be. I'm not sure if that will be the case when Josh Fryer is back in the fall or not. We'll have to wait and see. Donovan Jackson certainly living up to some of that 5-star hype in the way that Berm talked about his recruitment and another sort of generational prospect. It'll be interesting to see those two working together on the left side. And it definitely helps to have that anchor in the middle with Luke Wypler. And, aside from him talking about, the progress from week 1 at Minnesota, where he's thrust in there without much notice, to what he saw at the end of the year and the improvement, he's an angry guy.
That's the best way to put it.
Thursday morning, in that room right up there where they're serving breakfast, BTN put on the 1-hour replay of the game in November, and he said that TV almost came down. And I think that was a little bit of a juice builder for Ohio State at the midway point. These things can get, monotonous and complacent, even though the camp is much shorter than what they'll do in August. Sometimes you get a little carrot like that to go chase down, and Luke Wypler took that to heart, and he was like, I'm angry sitting here right now.
Big Ten Network's not going to throw that video away, though.
Well, of course not.
I think Ohio State would like them to, but
yeah.
I'm struck again by last year. I wrote about how the tight end room was basically just 5 guys who played other positions that had to learn how to play tight end.
Yeah.
And this year, it's only 3 guys that played other positions in high school. But the 2 guys that actually played tight end in high school, which is Sam Hart and Bennett Christian, are number 4 and 5 on the depth chart for Ohio State. You have Mitch Rossi, who, I asked him why he decided to come back to Ohio State. After, he came here as a walk-on and running back in high school, and he said that he realized middle of last year that he could play in the NFL.
Yeah.
And he said, this is a total mindset shift for a guy that was a walk-on running back from the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. And now he's like, I can actually play in the NFL. And so he's a little frustrated, I think, that he's not able to go this spring. But it is such an important thing for Joe Royer to know coming into camp, he is tight end 1. And, we've talked a number of times with coaches around here, and Joe Royer's name is one that people continue to talk about, is that the light has sort of come on for him. And I think for him, it's just knowing that it's his spot to take is very important.
It's pretty interesting when you can put that together, I think, and a little bit of a callback to maybe 2 years ago when you knew you had Jeremy Ruckert on the rise and much better flanked out, and Joe Royer can do that. And Kade Stover can do a lot of the similar things to what Luke Farrell did as a physical blocker attached there to the line. So I can see that coming a little bit back with that, 12 personnel. And I know Tim doesn't want any tight ends on the field, but that's not going to happen.
No. I just wish they'd call a fullback. That's my big problem.
Well, it depends on where he's lined up.
I know, of course it does, but I'm just thinking he's a fullback in this, and what he's talking about, the NFL.
Is a sandal a shoe?
Tyreek Smith was talking about this the other day. The NFL figures out a way to get their best guy on the field for certain situations, and he does intrigue. I'm sure he intrigues some personnel people because he knocks people's blocks off.
And when you talk about tight ends,
when he blocks,
I think it's interesting that Joe Royer's name keeps coming up, but it doesn't really keep coming up in a way. Like, they want to talk about how he's progressing, but also they don't want to set that bar high because he still is progressing. It's almost like you said, the way they talked about Jeremy Ruckert. Hey, he can do a lot of good things, but he's not complete yet. They want to talk about the way Joe Royer is coming along and becoming a good player and somebody who's going to contribute, but they don't want to say too much because they know that development is not complete. And so when you have Kade Stover, who we know, he said there's not a lot of demand for 260-pound linebackers anymore. He's right. But there is demand for a 260-pound mauler who can help in the run game. Yeah. And then when you add Joe Royer into that equation, let him catch some passes and learn from what Kade Stover brings to the run game and maybe try to put a little bit more weight on as we go into the fall. I think Joe Royer has a chance to be, one of those quiet guys who starts to emerge. Maybe not week 1 against Notre Dame, but maybe as the season progresses.
Yeah, and this month is like a springboard for some guys, pardon the pun. Enoch Vimahi is definitely playing with more confidence now, feeling more confident. They need those 6 and 7 and 8 guys to come on in that offensive line room. And according to all reports, he is definitely coming on. He's got this confidence that he said he didn't have a year ago, and playing the game. And he's an interesting dude to keep your eye on. But going back to Kade Stover, it's like Kevin Wilson said, the offensive coordinator, it's not about what's best for the team, it's about what's best for the player. And I get the sense that, I don't know if you do or not, I get the sense that Kade feels like he contributes better when he was on the offensive side of the field with a chance to get the ball in his hands. I said that earlier. Mm-hmm. He just wants to play, though, right?
I think he's torn between where his brightest future could be. If you got to ask him and all things were even, if he got to be a frontline first unit linebacker, okay, well, that's where he would be. But that's not going to happen for this team. And we talked about that with that position group. Like, he's going to be third or fourth in line at a Leo or Jack, and he's going to be maybe a second team, maybe a first team Sam. I don't know. Reed Carrico was out there the last couple of days. Maybe he could beat that out, but that package is not going to be used all that extensively for Ohio State. So I think when you start doing that math and maybe NFL math, that becomes a lot easier.
The key for Cade, and I don't want to speak for him, I know him fairly well, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of his mindset, is how does he take his mentality, which tells him, I want to be a linebacker, and take that and use it on offense. And that's something that Mitch Rossi talked about today. It's something Joe Royer talked about today. Those guys need someone like Cade in the room to bring a lot more of just an edge to that room. Tight end at Ohio State is not a glamour position.
No.
You know, the one reason we don't talk about guys like Joe Royer much, because who cares, right? It's because the tight end at Ohio State is never going to be a 50 catch a year type position. So I think in this building, they get tired of like hyping up the position because then the production never matches. And so people are like, is this the year? Blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't mean it's not an important position.
Yeah.
Cade is certainly a guy that has a different mindset than anyone else in that room. And so for him, it's how do you balance the linebacker, I want to kill someone mindset with I need to be an efficient pass catcher and a route runner. And can you meld those things together? Can you still be an aggressive route runner? Can you still, play special teams and get that I'm going to hit someone juice out, and he can, and that's what he's going to bring. And I just think if you had a team of 85 Kade Stovers, you'd win a lot of football games, but it would just look a whole lot different.
Well, it might be like 1965, you'd be the greatest team in the world.
Yeah, you'd win a lot of games.
I'm not sure it would work that well anymore. And we've never seen him play quarterback.
We can run the triple wishbone option.
I bet he can play quarterback. I bet he can.
Okay.
Sure he can.
By the way, and Luke Wypler, like you said a while ago about the video coming on and stuff. I mean, these guys aren't faking it. They're really driven.
That guy was angry.
But they're really driven about how that, as they call it, the Team Up North game went last year.
Right.
In the first half of that Utah game, I mean, there's a definite edge, because I told him, I asked him, you guys were working really hard this time of year ago, and through the season, through the summer and season, and what you found out that's not good enough. And he basically said, for want of another way of putting it, that is exactly right. They know there's an edge there that they didn't get to.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but like last week when we were here for Pro Day, I was talking to some of the guys, and a handful of them told me last winter was easy. Well, they said it. I mean, last winter was an easy winter for Ohio State's football program. It didn't have that psychotic edge to it.
Right.
And that has returned this offseason. And so I guess you'll see if that translates to the field, but it is different.
We've made this point a number of times, so I'm not breaking new ground, but if it's your first time going through a full winter with Mickey Marotti and you're balancing all this new stuff and inexperience and going, like, it's going to be hard to push them in a way that you can veteran players or people who have had something taken from them. Yeah. And again, like, that number is in the 40s for last year. Like, you can't replace that experience. That includes workouts.
Yeah.
And that part, you could see that, the physical development and what it takes to win a championship or to come up short. All that stuff was being dealt with for the first time. It's certainly true for DeJuan Jones. Berman and I have had this conversation before with what we watched in August last year. Tim, you and I as well. Can he handle some of the speed rush? So I asked him over there, like, he didn't get the feedback he wanted from the NFL evaluation. Part of it is handling the pass protection. And I said, I mean, how do you find this balance? Because as big as you are, you get to take up space. Like, people aren't going to be going inside of you much, but the speed to the outside, what do you have to do? So, well, that's the push and pull. Like, he has a unique physical gift in his size.
Yeah.
You have to use it correctly. And he was the last one over here on the 50-yard line today. After I asked him all those questions, sort of on the side, like, where are you going to find that improvement? He went over there and he did 5 or 6 extra pass sets just to finish it. He knows that's got to be the next level for him.
And what you just touched on there is also his Achilles, from the standpoint of when you watch him play, he's so big, he doesn't look quick. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then if somebody does beat him around the edge, then it's just exacerbated in people's minds. I think he's got the tools to become elite, and we'll see if he gets there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this offensive line is exciting unit just because, like the guy that we haven't talked about as the most experienced guy as far as time been here on the roster almost, Matt Jones. He's been here forever and has experience with a multitude of guys, you know, different positions, switching in and out, always being almost the sixth man on the offensive line. And now he finally gets a chance to start, and he seems more than ready. He seems like he's got a little bit more confidence knowing that he's going into this spring and summer as a starter. You know, he gets to line up next to Luke, who has experience, and DeJuan, who has experience. And you put all five of these guys together, and you know, we talked about the offensive line potentially being elite last year, but when it all started to shake out in August, you almost had a sense that it wasn't going to be exactly where it needed to be.
You had a sense it was an experiment almost a whole year.
Absolutely. And now, as we stand here in March, in the middle of spring practice, the five there, you look at them, that unit, I mean, could win the Joe Moore Award, guys. I mean, that is a
Joe Moore Award.
That is
you know, first spring is when you need to experiment, not last August 15th, and that's, I think, the biggest issue with the offensive line a year ago
is that we didn't see Thayer Munford playing
but they
guard in
don't have
spring.
to experiment. It's the big thing here this year. They don't have to.
Right, but this group, this starting five, is the experiment, and it makes a huge difference. There's no position, maybe in sports, where having the same guys together makes as big of an impact as it does on the offensive line.
But you remember I wrote a story after spring last year. Remember that story I wrote that could be, but they weren't in exactly the same spots. That could be their offensive line if you were putting the best players on the field, but sometimes the best players aren't the best fits. And
wow, that's clearly what they ran into last year.
Well, they played extremely well. This is number one offense in the country last year, you know, from a total offense standpoint. But let's face it, at crunch time, there were times when they couldn't block the run. They couldn't block for the run on a consistent basis, and they want to get back to that.
You shouldn't have to do a line change to be able to pick up third and one. And Ohio State was in a position a year ago where they had to bring in Matt Jones in those situations to try to cover up a hole there. And this fall shouldn't be that way. And certainly that is the goal this spring. And that is because, you know, what Justin Fry said at his introductory press conference, if it's 3rd and 2, we want people to know we're running it and they're going to get it.
And that also includes Cade Stover and Mitch Rossi mauling some people at tight end. So both of those groups came out to talk together. Yeah, whatever we want to call it. Those big physical dudes, dudes being dudes, they're at the halfway point of spring ball. It was nice to talk to all those guys, get some insight from some of the spotlight doesn't always shine on that group, but perhaps it should. That's Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. This has been the Practice Report. It's brought to you by Byers Auto. Halfway point to go. Saturday is the Student Appreciation Day practice, so we will all be back in here. There will be another practice report coming after that. You can stay tuned for full coverage of Ohio State at LettermenRow.com.